Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us on this digital transformation webinar experience. My name is Palisa Mushidi. I am part of the marketing team at Syspro Africa, and I'll be facilitating today's episode. We are excited to share in this journey with you. This webinar is a 4-part series starting today, followed by episodes on the 2nd, the 16th, and 30th of September. We sincerely hope that you'll be able to join us for the whole series over the next few weeks. Just a bit of housekeeping before we get going with our agenda. You will see on the Zoom platform, there's a chat box that will appear on the right of your screen, which you're welcome to use for general chat. Please be sure to click on the drop-down list and select all panelists and attendees if you want to chat to all attendees, or if you want to chat with the panelists, just leave it as all panelists only. If, however, you have a formal question you would like to ask one of our speakers, please use the Q&A box to type your question. Please kindly mark who your question is directed to. Should we not get around to answering everyone's questions during the webinar, we will be sure to come back to you back on email with the answers. We will be sharing the recording of this webinar with you post the event. We are also running a Twitter King competition where we are looking for that one Twitter user who will be engaging on this topic and episode using the hashtag SysproDX. That is SYSPRODX. That person stands a chance to win to the value of 500. And the winner will be announced at the end of the episode. Now that we have taken care of all the housekeeping, let us take a look at our agenda today, and the topic is, how digital is your business? We will be hearing from industry analysts, a Syspro customer, and our guest speaker, Musa Kalenga, who will give us insight on his keynote, Act Like a Human, Think Like a Brand. And of course, our head of solutions, Deidre Fry, will be taking us through the first part of this digital transformation journey. First up on our agenda is Arthur Goldstuck, who is an acclaimed writer, analyst, and speaker on technology trends. Over to you, Arthur.
Thank you, Palesa. Good morning to everyone on this cold South African morning, but we really hope this is a metaphor for what is coming, because spring is around the corner, and we hope the same applies to the global economy. It's always a pleasure to work with Syspro because I always feel that my messages are aligned with their own digital transformation journey. And without further ado, I'm going to take you into my journey into this digital future and how the shape of the future has changed. And we're going to start with a history lesson, but it's a history of the future and how people viewed the future in the past. This was the year 1900 at the World Fair, where they looked forward 100 years later to imagine how the world would look. And this is how they imagined the school would look. If you think about this picture, as archaic and bizarre as it looks, this is, in fact, a lot like what school looks like today. Texts are being fed into digital devices, which are then fed to students through either tablets, laptops, or tools like Zoom, for example. Except in this case, they imagine going straight into the pupils' brains. But it's not dramatically different to what we're experiencing today. But this also represents what you might call the difference between digitization, which is changing analog into digital format, and digitalization, which makes your processes digital. This isn't a digital process. This is simply changing analog to digital. And that's perhaps why it looks so archaic. Fast forward a couple of decades, and this is how a magazine called Electrical Experimenter, created by Hugo Gernsback, saw the future. Gernsback is regarded as one of the fathers of science fiction. So it's not too surprising that he had quite a clear idea of what the future could present. Now, when he combines the television and the telephot, as he called it back then, bear in mind, the television hadn't been invented yet. the first TV was almost a decade away, and he was already imagining people using this technology for personal communication. A little clunky, but fairly accurate. A decade later, it was completely accurate. Just the size and the format of the devices were different. But the idea of people being in a social setting and talking to other people elsewhere was absolutely spot on. This, in fact, symbolizes the problem of people being on their digital devices while in company of each other. But I just love the idea that you still spoke into a tube back then. And that was pretty much how remote speaking and presenting was imagined, because recording artists also were speaking into tubes back then, and in effect talking to audiences of millions who consumed their products later. Now we fast forward a few decades and we see this amazing prediction from the 1960s, which wasn't quite correct. They reckoned by 2016 we'd be able to link our brains to computers. But it's only out by about 10 years, because already we are seeing evidence that brain waves can not just be measured and monitored, but they can in fact be harnessed and converted into text. So the idea of thought to text is already real. It's being proven, and it's expected to become a reality in the late 2020s. Just beware of drunk thinking if you thought drunk texting was a problem. And then we move to this bizarre vision of the future. This is from way back in the past, in January 2020, when people still congregated like this for technology events. And today we look at this picture and we think, but how could they? The social distancing violations taking place here. But that is just a few months ago, and it was literally 8 weeks later that events like this began being cancelled en masse, literally en masse. And suddenly, this is how people are attending events. I'm not sure how many of you are wearing pajamas out there, or just pajama pants, at least, with a formal shirt on. I won't tell you if I am. But this is how the managers of people working from home imagine people are working. So they are wanting to introduce new monitoring measures. My only warning there is that people are in fact under enormous stress, and our research has shown that efforts to increase monitoring is increasing stress and reduces productivity rather than increases productivity. Let's just have a look at what people's obsessions are and how they've shifted in this time. Talking of Netflix, Netflix has always had strong interest, but when you look at the Google Trends graph for the last 9 months or so, you can see that blue line. When the pandemic really hit and lockdown began, that's when Netflix peaked in South African interest. And you saw Zoom, which had almost no interest in this country, suddenly jumping up as well at the same time. But the most interesting aspect of this is the yellow line, which is searches on school in South Africa. And the massive peak you see there was in January, when the back to school process began and people were desperately looking for schools in which to register their kids. And that interest in school remained high until the week of lockdown, when suddenly it dropped below interest in Netflix. But note how quickly it then overtook Netflix again. So you can see that people's interests and their concerns are around first the education of their children and how that will proceed. Then it is entertainment, and then productivity. But all of those remain strong. One of the factors that you could consider in this is that as people got used to using Zoom, they had less need to search on how to use it. And that's why you see a significant drop in Zoom. With Netflix, because they're constantly releasing new material, the interest remains high. But then school remains a massive concern when you consider that kids are in and out of school. Schools are opening, closing, and opening again. And this remains one of the great concerns of our society. But moving from this, to understand the change we see around us, we have to look at where the money is going. And you could call it the smart money. You could also call it the stupid money in some cases, because sometimes it's truly exaggerated. And I've put together a series of charts of share price performance of key organizations in this digital world to give you a sense of who is winning and who is losing and why. And the most interesting of all is Netflix, which now has a market capitalization of more than 200 billion rand. A year ago, it was well under 160 billion. Sorry, that should be dollars, not rand. And it was under 160 billion dollars. And the comparison from the beginning of the year to today shows you that it's almost doubled in value in this time. It had a brief crash at the beginning of the year when its subscriber numbers in America dropped slightly, but that is because they'd raised their prices. So in fact, they were making more money than ever. And that gives you an indication of how sentiment amongst investors is so quickly swayed just because a few subscribers went away because they didn't want to pay more money. And then it had a small crash when the pandemic hit in mid-March to beginning of April. And then you see it coming back massively as everyone realized that Netflix is one of the great beneficiaries. Look at its biggest competitor. This is the Walt Disney Company. Still a significant market capitalization, $232 billion, but it's actually dropped significantly from the beginning of the year. It crashed massively when the pandemic hit. And the reason for this is that it's heavily exposed to its theme park business. In other words, its physical business. So as well as the Disney Plus TV channel is doing in the digital world, so it's being dragged down by its physical interests. And that gives you a good sense of who thrives and who not necessarily dies, but certainly declines in this kind of environment. And Disney will probably be rethinking its theme park strategy significantly in the coming years. So the question is, what technology is everyone leveraging now that is having an impact on the value of businesses? And of course, the platform that you're all watching today, Zoom, is the byword for thriving in this environment. And Zoom is one of the few companies that in fact leaped up when the pandemic hit and didn't see that initial drop. It dropped slightly when competitors emerged, when security concerns emerged and the like. But today it is at its peak at $78 billion valuation from being less than $10 billion at the beginning of the year. And then there's Amazon, also through Amazon Web Services in the cloud, as well as its e-commerce business in the physical world, but conducted digitally. It has been one of the great success stories of the pandemic. Also saw a small dip when the pandemic hit, but then just began climbing and thriving. And this is despite massive costs being added to its bottom line. And you can see it's now worth $1.66 trillion. It's one of the 3 most valuable companies in the world, but dramatically more valuable than it was at the beginning of the year. Microsoft, similarly, not quite as thriving. In fact, it had a big dip when the pandemic hit, and then it began climbing steadily, and it's now at $1.6 trillion, and that is just behind Amazon. So these were some of the early gains. In just 3 months, Microsoft Teams grew 894%, Zoom 677%, and WebEx 400% in just 3 months. And this summarized the dramatic digital response to the COVID-19 pandemic. What we're also seeing at the same time, though, is a war between the past and the future. The past is the world of analog, but also of digitization, where you're simply converting analog into digital format. And the future is the world of digitalization. And that is, of course, digital transformation, which is the theme of today's event. Digital transformation, or DX, is truly the differentiator between the future and the past. And I'll show you what it looks like also in terms of 2 businesses that play different roles in this environment. This is HP Inc., which is the printer and laptop maker. Yes, they have one of the biggest market shares in the world in laptops, but a big chunk of their business is still in printers, producing paper. They also, of course, do scanning of documents, and that is, again, digitization. So HP is a big player in the digitization market. Look at their market capitalization, $26 billion. And now look at their big competitor, not in the printer market, but in the digitalization market. And this is DocuSign. DocuSign's business is, in fact, in signing digital documents. That's their core business. They have a range of other activities and services as well, but the core business is simply digital signatures of digital documents. And look at their market cap, 38 billion. It was 36 billion just a couple of days ago, $38 billion. So 50% more valuable than HP, which is a company that's been around for far longer and is perceived as being a far bigger organization. Simply by facilitating digitalization, this company has left its competitor in the dust. And this is what they promote, and part of the reason why their message has got such resonance. They eliminate friction and complexity of manual processes. Now, in the printer world, you still have tremendous friction and complexity. They meet industry standard compliances more easily because their processes are digital. And through digitalization, they increase productivity and efficiencies. And in effect, this is a summary of DX, of digital transformation, and why it is leaving digitization or physical processes in the dust. We conducted research with Cisco to ask South African corporations how advanced they were in DX, and just over 37%, close to 38%, said they'd fully rolled it out. Then we asked them, once lockdown ends, will you allow your staff to carry on working remotely? And guess how many said yes? 38%, almost exactly the same amount as those that were fully DX compliant, you could say. So you can see a very strong relationship between being digitally transformed and being ready to carry on working remotely, because the systems and processes were geared towards it. In fact, it's not a case of working from home, it's a case of being able to work from anywhere. So the digitally transformed company is also the incredibly mobile organization. What we see in this kind of trend is that those organizations that are able to embrace DX are able to do almost anything online, whether it's collaboration or whether it's a live event that you can scale up to any number of people, whether it's 10 or 100,000 people. It's almost irrelevant. You just have to provision the capacity for that. And the moment you provision the capacity, which you can do very easily in the cloud, then scale goes away as a problem. To us, this isn't about a change. It's change that's always been happening. For the past decade, we've been talking about digital transformation. Of course, it's only in the last couple of years that it's been referred to as DX, but DX has been with us for a long time. And it's not a case of companies suddenly embracing DX. It's a case of companies suddenly being aware that they are part of DX. So that is why we call it digital awakening. Companies are awakening to digital transformation rather than suddenly discovering it. Some are benefiting in a massive way. And I want to show you the startling contrast to the perception that people are no longer spending money. And that is a little company called Apple. Their share price is at an all-time high, and it's well over double what it was. Well, probably 50% more than it was at the beginning of the year. But look at their market capitalization, $1.98 trillion, about to pass the $2 trillion mark. There's been a lot of coverage lately of Tim Cook suddenly becoming a billionaire. People are surprised that he wasn't a billionaire already. But of course, he was only an employee of the company. But look at what the share price has done for him. and what demand for Apple products has done for the organization. Bear in mind that there are really two distinct Apple businesses. The one is the hardware business driven by the iPhone, which is now around the third most popular brand in the world, but it'll probably reclaim its second position with Huawei dropping in market share. But the other business is, of course, the Apple App Store, which has been the subject of a lot of anti-competitive attention in the last few weeks. And that also underlines just how much money Apple makes from its App Store. So they have a digital business, and they also have a consumer business that feeds the digital business. So an incredibly well strategized organization. The question is, what happens next? What is going to be the fallout from the COVID-19 crisis? Mark Walker will be showing you a fascinating graph later that shows you the shape of the crisis and what that shape will look like over the coming months. But for now, I want to share with you the Nielsen framework. Nielsen is a global media monitoring organization, and I'm constantly looking at their perspective of the future because they have a team of people trying to understand the framework for the response from consumers and businesses to the crisis. Now, in each of the next 4 slides from Nielsen, I want to show you the response of consumers to the crisis. And the very first response is what they call the basket reset, where consumers need to account for everything in their shopping basket, stretching their dollars, or in our case, our rands, to merge old and new needs. Where consumption will happen, they call this the homebody reset. Consumers will prioritize in-home spending over discretionary out-of-home expenses. So the travel industry, for example, will keep suffering as a result of this. Home improvements is going to be a massive beneficiary, but as will home entertainment, working from home, and learning from home. This is just to show you a South African response to these trends. This is a presentation, or from a presentation that Nedbank presented yesterday on the impact of COVID-19 on the South African economy. And they're quoting from the South African Reserve Bank's latest report on shifts in how people are spending, lending, and saving. The very first graph shows the extent of deposits. And you can see when the crisis hit in the middle of March, that savings suddenly leaped up. People stopped spending almost instantly because they realized that with this crisis and with unemployment looming and job security being an issue, they had better pump everything they had back into savings. Longer term deposits, a slight increase, but not as big as savings. And then demand deposits, in other words, having cash available, also jumped significantly. But at savings level is the dramatic shift. And you can see it hasn't come down significantly. So people remain concerned about whether they will have cash in the future. Then unsecured lending, you see dropping dramatically. Initially, for personal loans, it remained the same, but credit card spend fell almost off the cliff, and now it's slowly recovering. Overdrafts, you can see people try to eliminate immediately because they knew they wouldn't be able to service their overdrafts. And then home loans and vehicle loans, you can also see plummeted with lockdown beginning, and is now recovering because of interest rates being so low. So let's look at the next element of the Nielsen framework, where they look at the rationale reset. And this is consumers shifting their priorities in how they spend their spare cash. So priorities have changed dramatically. And then finally from Nielsen, the affordability reset. Consumers are now far more risk averse, and they're looking for products and services that deliver value, quality, and peace of mind. So bear that in mind, because the business decision maker is also a consumer and is also looking for value, quality, and peace of mind. And in many ways, this is what digital transformation allows. Let me show you how one sector has suffered as a result these shifts. This is the banking sector, and this again is from Nedbank's presentation from yesterday, looking at branch sales footfall for their clients. Now the top line, the 2019 light green line, shows the decline in visits to banks last year, so already well before lockdown began, before the COVID-19 crisis. You saw a significant decline in number of people visiting banks. And then you look at the dark green line, which is 2020, and you can see what happened with lockdown. The extent of people visiting banks dropped by half. This is despite banks being an essential service and remaining open. People just stayed away. So as lockdown eased, you can see people started coming back to banks, but as of June, it was still at 60% the level it was before lockdown. And this tells you that the banks are going to have to go fully digital. As much as they seem to lead the way, banks are not fully digitally transformed. The fact that they still operate in silos, that you still have to fill in forms for new accounts, even if you're a customer of a bank, and that it's almost impossible to cancel a credit card, tells you that the banks have to discover DX in a big way. And this graph tells you how much damage is occurring because of insistence on branch banking. That is going to change. There are many strategies that will underpin these responses from both consumers and businesses. You can't sum it up in one or two slides, but this gives you a flavor of the strategies and the changes and how every industry will have a different experience and will have to adapt and resurface in a different way. But they'll all have one thing in common. They don't have a choice. They have to undergo digital awakening. They have to digitally transform. It's a necessity for the new future. And there are three secrets to this digital awakening in the business world. That is collaboration between workers, between businesses, capacity. You cannot afford to not be able to increase or decrease capacity on demand. Only the cloud and digital transformation allows for that. And of course, transformation of your processes, but also your mindset is essential to survive in this new future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Arthur, for that insightful session. 87% of companies think digital will disrupt their industry, but only 44% are prepared for that potential digital disruption. Which statistic does your business fall under? Allow me to welcome Deirdre Fryer, Head of Solutions at Syspro Africa.
Thanks, Palisa, and morning, everyone. I just want to get my screen shared. So, digital awakening, as Arthur so puts it, is, I think, a very real situation. Pre-COVID, we had lots of conversations around digitalization, digital transformation, and digital journeys, and these were often seen as nice to haves, something business was going to get to, and then COVID happened, and we see ourselves in a very different world, and suddenly that digital journey is a priority, and going on that digital transformation spend becomes quite crucial. So today we wanted to just chat about a little bit about what a digital transformation journey looks like. When we are as businesses going on this journey, what are some of the considerations and some of the items or the best ways to really approach this? And so part of the digital transformation journey is also about unpacking and really understanding where the value can come from and how we can best utilize and make sure we are getting success out of this digital journey. So I want to just quickly start with the actual unpacking of the word digital transformation. You know, when we talk about this term, I think it's been used in so many different ways that it's actually become blurred as to what is real meaning and what is real value or outcome is supposed to be. And when we look, it's really made up of two parts. The first word being digital, which really is talking about taking our data or taking information and storing it in digital signals expressed as a series of digits of 1 and 0. And then we've got the second part of the phrase, which is the transformation phase. And when we look at transformation, it's about a process by which one figure, expression, or function is converted into another one of similar value. These two words stand on their own. They're independent words. Digital is digital on its own, and transformation is transformation on its own. And I think often what's happened, or what we've seen over the past, because we do know that there's research in industry and stats that not every digital transformation or every digital project is a success. And I think often what we find in this space is that one part of the coin was achieved. We managed to make something digital, really great, but the challenge was that we potentially didn't transform it. So if we look at these two very descriptors and we want to now bring them together, let's just focus on some of the words in the statement. When we look at digital, it's about using and storing data digitally. It's about having that information digitally ready and digitally acceptable. The transformation part then becomes a process of where we are converting something into value. So we can do something digitally, but if we don't actually convert it into value, we're not really transforming it, because then all we've just done is digitize it. And so what we need to just keep our focus on when we are going on digital journeys and we're going on a digital path is that to really achieve success on digital transformation, it's quite important that we make sure both sides of this journey are being executed and we're seeing the results from both sides. So part of this journey and conversation is also about understanding where digital transformation fits into a business. Very traditionally, what we often see is digital transformation, digital projects are isolated. They're generally put on the CIOs or the CTOs stack, and we really kind of just really make the IT team responsible. Surely they're responsible for digital transformation. So we tend to verticalize it, but ultimately what it is, it's a horizontal journey. It's not one individual or one department's responsibility. It's really about the entire business going on a digital transformation journey and the entire business becoming digitally aware. So what we're starting to see, and I think the awakening, what is really starting to help us understand is that it's about everyone going digital. It's about all parts of the business, all areas of the business, all roles of the business across the organization and across our processes actually embracing digital and not really just relying on it to be in one area or one team or one individual's responsibility. So on that note, what we then also see is, what is a DX journey? What does a journey for digital transformation actually look like? And this is where a lot of words start coming into play. We start to hear things like robotic process optimization and digitization and digitalization and digital transformation and let's digitize, and all these words start blurring in, and then we start hearing things like artificial intelligence and bots and everything coming across the line. But in essence, when we look at a true digital journey or digital transformation journey, there are some logical steps and generally a path that we start on. The first part that we often see business or people being able to become the most comfortable with is the concept of digitization. What do we need to look at in the business, and what do we need to digitize? This becomes very prevalent now in the sense of where we're trying to reduce touch points, where we're trying to get things quickly electronic or digitized so that we can access it anywhere and really drive that collaboration. We start to identify digitization areas. A common area where we often see digitization happening very quickly, where we want to take something physical and make it digital, is when we hear about companies going on a paperless journey. Basically what they want to do is they want to make sure any documentation within the business is converted into a digital format. And so what we tend to do is we tend to identify areas that need to be digitized. What is manual? What can be digitized? Let's get it digitized. So that's great. We've taken our paper, we've made sure it's electronic, it's digitized. But then what we start to realize on part of this journey is the next step of digitalization. So now we've got all our documentation electronic. How do we encourage collaboration in this? So if I consider the paperless journey and we think about it from a delivery context, part of digitization is we've gone paperless, which means my delivery notes are not physical documents. So how do I now get a customer to accept that? How do I get them to agree to the delivery? So here we start to look at digitalization opportunities. How do we use mobile applications? How do we use something like DocuSign, which Arthur referred to in his discussion, to help us now drive a digital experience in this scenario? So we look at tools and technology to help us drive the digitalization and be able to introduce concepts like sign on glass, where we don't need a physical paper to accept a signature. We can actually get an electronic signature via a mobile application. So we take the digitization, we move it into digitalization with technology and helping us improve the process. But then ultimately what we then move and we see the next step forming into is the digital transformation. So I've digitized my paper, great. I have digitalized it, so I've given ways to engage with that digital format now so that we can now embrace that digitalization journey. But how am I going to transform it? What's the value I'm going to bring? So suddenly, when we start to look at the digital transformation and we start to look at it across the entire process, when we now start to take the results of the digitization and the digitalization and make value out of that, is when we're starting to bring it into true digital transformation. All of the business is comfortable that everything's now electronic, but now what we can start to do is look at ways that we can reduce times. Because I've had a sign on glass acceptance of the delivery, that means I can automatically kick off an invoice, which means that by the time the delivery truck's already back, we've already invoiced the customer, which long-term should have a knock-on effect to our order-to-cash days, which means we should be able to get our money in quicker from a business perspective, therefore reducing our debtors days as well. So what we're starting to do is we start to see now, by starting this little project of digitization and getting everything in play, we can start to look at the digital transformation side and say, well, now that we've got it digital, what value can we bring out of it? What can we improve? How can we add value to the process, and what benefit can we leverage from a business perspective? So when we talk a digital journey or digital transformation, it's not just about digital transformation. It is about these other steps of digitization and digitalization and bringing them all together so that we really can start to do that transformation and actually start to bring in that value across. So what we see is very quickly, it's often a logical sequence. We start, we embrace the digitization, and then we move along in the process. And I suppose part of the reason is understanding why the digital journey is becoming so important and really what's driving the business change. From a COVID perspective, it's accelerated it. We suddenly realized that because we're working from home, because we need to drive more collaboration, because we need more insight into our actual access to data and access to information, we need to be more responsive and agile and flexible as business. But even pre-COVID, part of the reasons for driving digital has a lot to do with our external environment and external factors. So the one area we're seeing now, or we have seen over the many years, is we have a consumer base, but also a customer expectation of a right now culture. We've become so used to getting things quickly, click of a button, information quickly, Netflix, entertainment quickly, all these different things. Even if we look at Uber and other sorts of mechanisms, we have become accepted and almost expect a right now experience. I want it quickly and I want it as soon as possible. In fact, yesterday, please. So this has put a lot of pressure on business to look at ways to do things faster and drive more efficiency. The other thing is we've seen globalization. I think just with the way our economies and what the pandemic has also just highlighted for us even more now so, is how globalized we are as nations and as countries, and how integrated across businesses we are from global spend and global collaboration. So globalization has also driven a need for us to be more digital so that we can cross-share information and get visibility very quickly when trading across countries and across different economies. We're also social butterflies. People love social media, they engage with social media, it makes them feel connected to something, they look for influencers, people are making careers out of influencing, and so it really is an important concept that we have to be so mindful of. Our brand is out there, our delivery, our customer experience, everything hinges around what's potentially going to be put onto social media and where social trends are going. People will look to other people for encouragement or brand recognition or brand suggestions. So we've got this demand of always having to get things right, because if we get things wrong, very quickly, a lot of people could know about this thanks to social media. So this concept of being able to get accuracy and get things done quickly and effectively all the time has really, really put a lot of pressure as well, and driven even more need for digitalization to help us on this, to try and improve that performance and that accuracy. We've also got a very informed customer. People are doing a lot of research before they spend. They're doing a lot of insight into products, and going online and looking for answers to questions before they make a buying decision. Generally, by the time they're making a buying decision, they've compared your product to at least 4 or 5, if not 10 other products, and they've really gone through a lot of insight. So being able to have everything available digitally and making that ability for that customer to make the right decision becomes quite important as well, so that they can see. And they often want to know what the source or the history of a product is. We see this quite a lot in the food space. You know, people want to know the source of the farmer or the source of how food was grown and that sort of thing. So even though they're not necessarily they're buying from a retailer, they still in essence also want to be able to track back. And so digital tools and digital processes really start to help us drive that visibility as well, and really give that informed customer the information that they're looking for as well, to help support that buying decision. And then the last area is just customers have choice. We've become such a competitive world, and thanks to globalization, it's not just about local choice anymore, about what they can choose locally. We can get product from most places now. If you're prepared to wait for just an extra day or two delivery, chances are you could get it from a completely different country. So choice has become quite an important factor. And when we are struggling for choice, when there's so much choice available, we've really got to be up on our game to make sure that we are the product of choice, or that your business's product is the product of choice. And so again, by adding efficiency to our processes and making sure that as a business, we can turn things around quicker and we can streamline and we can be more effective, really helps support that choice process as well, because we would be a recommended or a suggested product from a customer experience perspective. So a lot of these influencers have pre-COVID have been driving the need for a digital change. With the COVID and with the pandemic coming in, we've just seen that accelerate, and that's accelerated even more so because now we've even got security and health concerns to think about as well, and really looking at quality factors too, and try and reduce that human touch point and that human interaction, but yet still make things function and make things work. So really is quite a lot of change driving and pushing towards a digital world. So when we start a digital journey, there are really 3 steps that one needs to consider. We have to consider, firstly, when we want to start anything on a digital transformation space or a digital journey, what is it you want to achieve? I want to go paperless. Fantastic. But why? What's the value and what's the reasoning for wanting to go paperless? We want to bring Industry 4.0 into our production facility and really start to get all our machines connected. Really great. Going to drive some efficiency if we know why we want to do it. What's the value that it's going to bring? So the very first thing we have to ask ourselves when we are going on a digital transformation journey and we're looking to go digital in any space is, what is the outcome? What is the purpose? And what is the value going to be to the business? This could be an indirect or a direct. It could result in an increase in customer experience or customer satisfaction. It could be a number of different reasons, but we really have to be very clear about what it is we want to achieve and what that success is going to look like, so that we can also measure it and we can measure the success of the digital journey as well. So when we look at what we want to achieve, we have to understand that there's often different reasons for a DX focus. When we look at previous DX projects, and we've talked to a lot of businesses and customers around what the DX focuses are, one area often comes up is that concept of information transformation. So here we are looking at ways to automate processes. We want to digitize manual areas of our processes or manual areas within the business. And we want to really bring it into a digital space so that we can automate it, we can reduce time from one point to another within a process, and really just get our turnaround time quicker and be more efficient and be more effective, even to the point in certain finance teams getting reconciliations done quicker. There's a number of different ways where we look at information transformation and we identify that as our reason for a digital journey. And ultimately, we're trying to do this to create a competitive advantage. The quicker we can get things done, the quicker we can turn around a process, the faster we're going to be to delivery to customer, in which point we will be creating ourselves a competitive stance. The other area that often comes up as to why we want to see information transformation, we're actually seeing this quite a lot since March and since we started lockdown, is that businesses are looking to a digital journey or a digital transformation to create new operating models, look at ways to create new revenue streams. Some businesses we've seen during this COVID phase completely shift. They've gone from selling potentially alcohol to doing sanitizers to doing medical equipment. We've seen businesses shift and reinvent themselves quite quickly in the sense of creating different operating models. So the pandemic created that need for business to reinvent itself. But in a lot of cases, what we see in the digital space is when we start the digital journey, what it allows us to do is start to consider new operating models and new revenue streams. So for some of our customers, especially our equipment manufacturers, what we often see is they're now going into this concept of rentals. Let's not sell our product. Why don't we rent our product? And with our rental, why don't we add a service component to it? So we'll service it as well. And we create a OpEx type revenue model coming in rather than our traditional CapEx model where we would just sell it, it's done, it's dusted, the customer has a product, versus now we rent it, and with that we add a service to it, and now we're driving an OpEx model versus a CapEx model. So we see the need for operating model transformations coming up quite a bit, and really digital opening up the opportunity for business to consider new ways and new streams of being able to achieve this. And then often the most cited reason and the number one reason why people need to go on a digital journey is about our customer transformation. And it's really about how do we get our customer experience improved. And I think often what we see here is we go, okay, but that's fine. We're going to improve our websites. We're going to improve e-commerce. But often that customer experience is not just about how the customer necessarily engages with the business, but it's about the delivery cycle and the success factor as well. So we can improve our online presence and we can improve the way we engage with our customer digitally. But if we don't improve our backends, if we don't reduce our turnaround times and our lead times and our stock availability and accuracy and all of those processes as well, it does have a direct long-term impact on the customer experience because it delays their satisfaction rating. So we often see that when we look at digital projects, it's about also looking at the customer journey and looking at ways that we can improve that customer journey end to end, and how do we digitize that to drive that efficiency and that productiveness. So from a DX vision, what we see is where can we digitize? Where can we drive digitalization? What tools and technologies should we incorporate into our process? And ultimately, how do we transform that? How do we turn it around? How do we make it into something valuable? And really, how do we shift that? And so the other aspect to consider is sometimes when we look at that digital journey, again, we tend to siloize it in the sense that a process very often is not just about one department or one area within a business, But if we look at it a bit broader and we look at it across the supply chain, it's also around interaction between one company and another company and a stream of interactions of collaboration across a process. So part of your DX vision and your journey also has to be that consideration of what are my external factors? What's my external process looking like as well? And are there ways to improve and digitize in that area as well? So some common trends that we're seeing quite quickly now, especially in the supply chain space, is how do I get my collaboration between my business and my suppliers better? How do we automatically transfer information from them to us and vice versa, so that we can get reduction of purchase deliveries and we can get quicker visibility and we can get quicker insight into actually what's happening from our sourcing perspective, so that we as a business can be more agile and responsive to our delays, or potentially be more agile and responsive to being able to deliver quicker to our customer. So from the downstream side of the supply chain space, what we're seeing is a lot of focus on those external factors as well as collaborating and driving digitalization between organizations, from suppliers into organization. But then we've got the upstream side of the supply chain as well that's being considered. So if I am a business that produces, and predominantly most of my product goes to another business, like a wholesaler or a retailer, they then on-sell my product to a consumer. Now, traditionally, from a business perspective, my concern was my engagement between myself and the wholesaler or the retailer. But what we're starting to see from a digital perspective, and really understanding that true customer experience and what that customer journey looks like, is we're actually starting to look at digital to help us also understand the consumer side of that. So even though my retailer supplies the consumer, I, as the owner of the product, actually want to get more in touch and more collaborative with the end consumer as well. So how do we drive digitalization to help us get that insight? How do we drive digitalization to help us get closer to our end customer? And how do we drive that loyalty and really monitor and manage that customer experience, so that we really drive continuity of business? So digitalization really starts to become a much bigger topic. We start internally, we focus internally about how we can digitalize. And then what we've got to also consider is how we expand that digitalization into a broader space of our supply chain as well, and collaborate with our external parties. So the next question is, how ready are you? Are you ready for digital or not? So I want to just keep everyone a little bit engaged, and let's just see how everyone's doing on this fine morning. So we're going to go into a bit of a poll. There's two concepts that I would like everyone to quickly vote on. Are you personally a digital native or a digital immigrant? And is your business a digital native or a digital immigrant? You may not know the answer right now, and I can tell you there's no right or wrong answer. Don't see it as a bad, positive, or a negative. It's just, are you a digital immigrant or are you a digital native? And we're going to unpack this a little bit now. So if everyone can just jump on that poll and let us all know, and let's see where our poll is sitting. Okay, we're just going to wait for the poll results to come up quickly, because this is really quite an important concept. As individuals, we are either quite digitally aware or we're not. So if we look there, 60% of our current audience is saying that they personally are digitally native, and 40% are acknowledging that they are digital immigrants. Then when we look at it from a business context, we kind of go, okay, so as individuals, we're quite digitally native, but when we then look at our business, we see our businesses are actually more digital immigrants. And this talks for a lot of businesses. A lot of businesses have been around for 20, 30, 40, 50, 70 years, 80 years. And so when the business started, when process happened, when we initiated, and as we've gone through the years, digital was not at the space it was today. So what we're starting to realize is that we've got to learn to become digital. We see this quite different for new businesses. Any new SME, any new startup business, they generally tend to start as digital natives. Everything they do from the ground up is digital. Whereas traditionally we're finding a lot of pre-existing businesses have to go on a digital journey. And so what we have to understand is that we are potentially a digital immigrant, but that doesn't mean we can't get comfortable with digital and go digitally native. So we have individuals that are digital natives, but potentially the business is still a digital immigrant. And this is quite important to understand because it talks to two things of your digital journey. One, if we are digital immigrants, we've got to understand that there's a learning process, a much higher learning curve, an upskilling curve that has to happen within the organization and within people in order to make them and be more comfortable with digital. So there's a lot more effort and time that's got to be put into making people digitally comfortable. However, if we are very digital native, it means we're quite comfortable to embrace technology. We're quite comfortable to try out new things, but that in itself also brings a risk. We tend to chop and change or want to chop and change quite quickly. Oh, this didn't work instantly, or there were a couple of issues up front. No, let's choose something else and move on. We tend not to always want to just stick it out a little bit longer. We're quite quick to just change to the next trend or the next buzz. So both of these have got positive pros, and both of them and some of them have got cons as well. And we've got to be quite mindful of the space. We've got to understand where we're coming in from. Are we coming in with digitally aware and digitally comfortable mindset, or is this something we've still got to learn and something we've still got to teach and something we've still got to embrace? Because this will really talk to how quickly your digital project will go and how quickly we will embrace and see results of a digital journey, or also how much reluctance potentially we're going to get in transforming and doing a digital transformation project. And in all of this, what we then have to understand is that there's different enablers. So we have to understand that we are going on this journey. It's a horizontal journey, not a vertical journey. We have to understand from what point we're starting, what the value is, why we want to go on this journey. And then we've got to decide, well, how are we going to do this? And this is really where the enablers come in. So when we often talk about digitalization or digital transformation, this is where the big words like artificial intelligence, digital citizens and bots, going cloud, everything starts to come into play. Because when we start to go on a digital journey, we've got to understand that there are different technologies and tool sets available to us to really help us embrace and drive success of this journey. So when we talk about a digital transformation process, we will hear about these enablers. We will hear about APIs for automation and integration, artificial intelligence, and cloud. It doesn't mean every single tool set has to be used. These are enablers. Why are we doing it? And what do we need to use to get our results? If we need to go cloud, which very often is the case because we want to be scalable and we want to be agile and we want to be flexible, then we've got to bring our cloud and we've got to look at our cloud journey and how we're going to use cloud to support the objective of the digital journey. Artificial intelligence, are there certain fast calculating algorithms and answers that we need to get to quickly? And if so, can artificial intelligence do that for us? Because it's what it's designed to do. It's designed to compute really, really fast and give us response very, very quickly. So not every enabler has to be part of your digital transformation journey. It's about understanding what your journey looks like and making sure you choose the right enablers to bring into the process to help you on that digital journey and get into the results and the outcomes that we're looking for. And then the last thing to consider is, what information do you really need? So a big topic and a big conversation piece around digital transformation is the concept of Industry 4.0. We already know that Industry 5 is on its way, and we're still trying to get into concept and comfortableness with Industry 4.0. And so when we talk about Industry 4.0, it's really about collaboration. But it's about collaboration of everything, collaboration of technology, collaboration of devices, and collaboration of people, and bringing that all together into a sharing collaborative space. So Industry 4.0, when we look at our production facilities and when we look at our warehouses, is about how do we take our equipment and how do we take our machinery in those spaces, and how do we get data out of them? And what do we then do with that data? So I'm going to go back to point one of why we need to go on a digital transformation, or if we're going to go on a digital journey, what's important. Remember, it's all about the value. What is it we want to achieve? So IoT and APIs have allowed us to bring and connect machinery and equipment and get data from them so that we can put them into a digital format and we can then store that information. So great, we can take what our machines are doing, we can digitize them, and we can store that information. Now we want to transform it. And this is often where the trick comes in, is because when we start to connect machines and when we start to connect our machines in our factory and our production facilities, there is a lot of data. There is a lot happening on those machines. We can check temperatures, we can check vibrations, we can use visioning computers and video, and we can watch things happening on the production line, and we can literally get milliseconds of information constantly coming into a data set. But the challenge is that's a lot of data, and it creates what we call noise, a lot of noise. And so what we've got to be able to do is we've also got to be able to understand what information do we need. Do we need temperature readings from this machine? If so, why do we need it? Let's target it. Let's target the information we're looking for, and let's just pull that information rather than just everything. So we've got to be very mindful of the value we can bring by getting our machinery and our equipment sharing information with us. But once we're getting that information, we've got to be able to mine that noise. And we've got to be able to take that noise and turn it into something of value so that we can respond, so that we can be more effective. So for example, on some of our conditioning, on condition monitoring and things like that, the reason we would want to potentially monitor a machine is to know that potentially this machine is going to need a service or some downtime in the next 3 weeks, so that we don't get caught blindsided. We actually can better prepare for that. We can better plan for it, because by monitoring what the usage and the consumption and the throughput is of the machine, when we start to see a decline, that starts to talk to the fact that potentially the machine's not optimally performing. We need to do something to make sure it gets back up to optimal performance. And let's do that before we actually hit a blindside where it breaks and therefore all production stops completely. So when we start to think about those kinds of use cases, about bringing integration of Industry 4.0 and our machines into our space so that we can do that kind of monitoring and measuring and visualization of what's happening, it's very important that we know what it is we want to get out of it so that we can filter out that noise. So our first step is let's digitize. Let's make sure the machines are able to share information with us by using sensors and IoT and APIs to integrate. And then the second part is, now that we're getting all this data, let's make sure we're streamlining that noise and making the data something of value. And this is often where we hear the concepts of, again, business intelligence coming in and artificial intelligence, where AI can actually be put on top of this information and this data and really start to help us focus on all the information and make that information of something of value and importance. So there's a lot to consider when we go on this journey. Those 3 steps, the fact that it's not an isolated process, it's a horizontal process. How prepared are we? How skilled are we in the business? Are we digital immigrants? Are we natives? Based on that, what's going to be a better approach for us? And really just what are the enablers? What are the tools we need to use? And how best are we going to get there, get those tools in, And then once we've got the tools and we've got that digitalization happening, where's the value going to come from? And what's the information we need to get out of that to do the value? So remember, in the beginning, digital and transformation, we're going to go digital, great, but let's not forget that transformation phase. If we are making something digital, but not bringing value out of it, we're not transforming it into something value, we're not really going to see the success factor that we're looking for. So when we're on this journey, I just wanted to remind everyone a little bit about not getting caught up. There seems to be this concept of, oh, I'm going to get that tool, I'm going to get that technology, we're going to put it in, and life's going to be great. This is a very tricky space in the sense that we can use similar tools. We can use tools that are repeatable, but every business is slightly different. We all have a different nuance. You have a different need or a different way that you do things. And you do that because your strategy is different to your competitors. That's part of your competitive advantage. So whilst we could potentially use the same enabler, the same tool set, we have to be mindful of the fact that in a digital journey, one size doesn't fit all. It really is about what your business needs and what your business wants to achieve out of this. So whilst we can use the same enablers and technology sets and process, we have to be mindful of the fact that it has to be tweaked and it has to be understood for your business and what your business wants to achieve, answering that point number one. The other thing just to be very, very mindful of is often what we see is we see people putting in technology or putting in a digital project to fix a problem. And unfortunately, what we often see in that case is that technology by itself will not fix the problem. If the underlying process or the underlying issue is there, potentially all technology or digitalization is going to do is it's going to amplify the problem. It's actually going to create dysfunction. It's going to highlight it. It's going to exacerbate it. It doesn't mean we get to resolve it quickly because it becomes very, very, very aware. We become very aware of it. But when bringing a digitalization in or technology in to fix a problem, it's really important to understand what that problem is and make sure that the process around that is being fixed at the same time. Otherwise, we are going to potentially see a very, very dysfunctional output or dysfunctional result, which we want to avoid disruption for the organization as well. The other thing to consider is the mindset. Technology brings fear. I think at the moment we've all kind of learned to embrace technology, but when we all went into lockdown and when the concept of being in lockdown happened, there was this fear that we're not going to socialize anymore, that as people we're going to become isolated and that's going to have a negative impact. But we've adopted, we've embraced change quite well. Hence, we're sitting on an online call right now in a webinar and we're engaging with you. What we've realized is that by necessarily shifting to a virtual space hasn't meant that we are going to be isolated and that we've completely become unsocial beings. In fact, I think in some cases it's even made us more social. So technology does have this fear. And what we've really got to try and do and encourage people in a digital transformation process is to overcome that fear and help them transform that behavior, help them embrace a digital approach. And very often this fear comes from replacements. So there are a lot of concerns that by bringing in digital projects, by bringing in digitalization, we're going to replace people's jobs. In fact, often the reverse is the case. Instead, what we see is that technology just makes us smarter. It's not that we as human beings can't do maths. Some people can do maths super, super well and super, super quick. We just can't do it at the rate that a computer can. A computer will always do it quicker for us. So what we want technology to do is to enable us, is get us that result quickly, so that as a human, I can then respond to it. I can react. I can deal with those exceptions. So what we try and do is we try and take out the repetitive and laborious tasks, and rather just highlight the exceptions and the areas of importance to humans, and really then allow us as human beings to make the right decisions, but make change and decisions and be flexible and agile very, very quickly. So it's an important concept that when we are going on digital journeys, we've got to understand that there's a human element of fear and there's a human element of a mindset change that has to happen. And we've really got to embrace this concept that technology is not against us, but it's actually supporting us and in fact going to make us stronger. So on some of those lessons learned, I just really wanted to end off and just really bring everyone to the thought of where we're going today. A lot of the research, a lot of the analysts, a lot of the stats that we're seeing is that CEOs and business leaders are acknowledging the fact that digitally mature companies are more profitable. We are seeing their revenues increase. And so one has to say, whilst we know digital projects and going on a digital transformation journey does create cost to the business, we also have to ask ourselves that if we do not take that cost, if we do not do that change, what will our end result be? What is the cost for us not to change? And will we still be the successful company, and will we still be in a successful space and achieving our business goals and strategies if we don't embrace this technology and digital journey and space? So on that note, I know we have a few questions and potentially some Q&As happening. So I just want to quickly hop onto our chats and see if there are any questions. I want to thank everyone for their time. So let's just quickly see what's happening on our Q&A space. Deirdre, it's really economical in South Africa. Is it really economical in South Africa? Initial capital is high, risk of the theft and fraud is high, so insurance. Oh, sorry, I was trying to see there. My question just went away. One of the questions I've got here is, how does Syspro help in digital transformation? So from a Syspro perspective, just from our product viewpoint, a lot of our focus, especially in our areas of innovation and new capabilities that we're bringing into the product, are focusing on the digital transformation stack. We have built-in artificial intelligence, we have the built-in API layer so that we can help drive automation and system-to-system integration and efficiency. We've got a lot of features that allow us to take everything digital from a paperless perspective. There are a lot of capabilities that we have introduced into our product suite just to really try and make those enablers a lot more available to businesses. Our cloud offering, our ability to be able to put your solution and your business application into platforms like Azure and really just embrace those technology sets is everything that we as Syspro as a product have standardized on and really introduced into our space to try and support business to quickly and flexibly and be agile in adopting digital transformation. Another question, obviously digital transformation may be expensive. How can companies embark on the journey without hurting their bottom line, or must they invest in the future to make the company more successful? This is actually a two-edged approach. What we find a lot of businesses not necessarily considering is that they've already got the tool sets in hand. They just don't realize the tool sets that they have the capabilities to enhance digital transformation. So for a lot of businesses, what we encourage the first step to do is, as well, in just trying to understand your own business landscape, is look at your tool sets, look at your technology set that's in the business already, look at things like your ERP system, like your e-commerce platforms, like all your different digital tools, and really look at what their capabilities are. Technology and software applications are changing all the time, and we're not necessarily always mindful of how they've advanced. So start with an internal analysis first. Look at what your tool set is currently and understand what it's capable of. From that, you will then understand where your gap potentially sits on what you want to achieve. And this is where a heavier investment may need to come in. You may now need to consider replacing your e-commerce platform, for example, because potentially the one you're using is not really achieving what you need it to be. That's really where you're then going to have to look at investments to replace. Obviously, if your existing tool sets have got a lot of the capabilities already, your investment will be less because then it will just be about service and getting those capabilities embraced. But from a gap analysis, you may have to be replacing software, which would have a higher investment. But I would encourage that analysis happen and really understand your existing technology set. We're in South Africa, with regards to embracing virtual reality specifically as one of those enablers now as we're in lockdown and remote working. I know it is eagerly embracing in other countries such as the US. So interestingly enough, where we're starting to see some of this happen is in the service space quite a bit. We are starting to see a lot of, well, not a lot of businesses, some businesses explore this opportunity in being able to virtually see what's happening on a factory floor, and then from there being able to advise and give support and give suggestions. Microsoft actually has a really, really nice video on this, especially with the glasses and their ability to do services virtually. And really we are seeing a lot of that starting to play in different spaces. And the other area we're seeing it quite a lot happening is in the warehouse space. From picking cycles where people are actually starting to use things like virtual reality and augmented reality to actually help drive that warehouse routing and planning and optimization and really just drive that visibility of what's sitting into the warehouse. So it's still a very low focused or low invested space, but I think the opportunity as we're starting to see people embrace digital more, we're going to see a lot more coming out of VR and AR. How can digital transformation propel a radio station like ours on this journey? Since seeing that the pandemic has kept some audiences glued to their radios if they don't have televisions. So I will be honest, radio is maybe not my area of speciality, but I think in a digital context, I would look at the ways that you can engage with your users via digital means. People love apps. Digital apps are becoming quite common on in everyone's palms via our phones. And so one other way to really consider is how best you can engage and collaborate through digital apps and digital platforms. How has the cloud model been impacted by this coronavirus? This is considering that reduced revenues mean paying for the cloud. So there's a question here about whether or not cloud has been impacted by the virus. I think it has, but for the benefit of cloud. I think if anything, what we've seen is an acceleration into cloud and people wanting to suddenly embrace cloud a lot more. So when we saw the shift to work from home, what we also saw in that space was people suddenly realizing the limitation of being on premise. And that potentially their infrastructure wasn't there to support that. So we saw a lot of people wanting to shift to cloud options and shift to looking at using more cloud technologies so that we could deploy and we could get employees using technology quicker. We saw this with Teams, we're seeing it with Zoom as well, is that those tools had to be cloud orientated in order for us to make them quickly available for everyone within the organization. So the impact for cloud, and we would definitely in our next episode, I know we're going to have Microsoft on the call as well, definitely be unpacking that quite a lot more and discussing that cloud result too. Okay. So I'm not seeing any more questions right now. We did want to leave quite a bit of time for some Q&A, but please keep posting questions during the next couple of sessions as well, and letting us know what your questions are. And as we can, we will continue to answer and respond. And then if you need to reach out to anyone, please also just let us know, and we're happy to engage afterwards. I really want to thank everyone for the time with me today. We are going to gear up for our next speakers. So please don't go anywhere, carry on joining us for the session. But Palesa, I'm going to hand over back to you, and I'm going to say thank you to everyone.
It is interesting to know that nearly half of all companies say improving customer experience and customer satisfaction were the leading influences to starting a digital transformation journey. Thank you, Deirdre, for that thought-provoking presentation. That brings us to the end of our first half of today's episode. We are going to take a quick body break, so grab a cup of coffee and be sure to join us again in 5 minutes when we will resume promptly at 10:25. See you then. And we are back. I hope you have been tweeting and engaging in these fascinating conversations we have had this morning. Up next, we have Mark Walker, Associate Vice President of IDC.
Thank you very much, Palesa, and thank you for hosting us on the show today. Great to be here, and hopefully that we've got some interesting information, and we've had some really interesting areas from everybody else on the call. And it's been really nice to hear, you know, what Arthur has said. You know, what I took away from him is it's very much digital transformation. It's a reality. It's happening now. I stole a phrase from the 2010 World Cup there, South Africa, Kenako, and in Swahili it's Wakani ni sasa, which means the time is now. And we have to actually get onto this journey and start moving along on this journey. And, you know, this is where the future is. This is the reality that we're facing right now. And as we go forward, we're going to continue having to really, you know, move along and move very quickly to take advantage of the opportunities that digital transformation has brought for us. You know, the news headlines are not, they've taken a very quick view on this. And, you know, with this recent pandemic, everybody has noted very, very quickly how COVID-19, how the pandemic has accelerated this digital transformation journey. We've heard stories across the board from the suppliers of communication technology, as well as from people that are involved in the industry on the user side, regarding where they were and where they were planning to be from a technology point of view going forward. And everybody has brought their plans forward very, very quickly. On the supply side, we're seeing some of the big systems integrators having to provision virtual private networks from a company that would have 500 one day, and then post the weekend, they would be expecting 11,500 simultaneous VPNs to be operating, so enabling the workforce to work from home effectively. So the reality is, you know, if you see the last point on the slide, is that COVID-19 has sped up digital transformation by about 5.3 years according to IoT now, which is quite interesting. You know, in South African and the East African context, I'm seeing, you know, guys that are saying, we've taken the plans that we were only going to be reaching our IoT type plans or our work from home plans or our remote connectivity plans in 2-3 years time where it would be implemented. That is immediately being brought back, and other projects have been put on the back burner or on hold. So very much this is a reality. This is now, this is a journey. You know, Deirdre said the key component here is focus. And I think that's the word that we should really take forward with us. We really need to focus on where is the digital journey going? Where are you on it? And how do you go forward effectively? And I think the key here is just to see worldwide, the GDP country, the GDP by country has accelerated very, very quickly. And what we're seeing, you know, if we look for just 2019, 2020, the growth in terms of the amount of work that's are digitally transformed enterprises versus non-transformed enterprise, natives versus immigrants, is changing significantly. So we're looking 2018, we're looking there about 17% odd. By 2023, we're expecting organizations to about just over 53%, in fact, of the marketplace will be digitally transformed, digitally enabled enterprises. So this is a trend that's ongoing. It's driven by some of the factors that Deirdre has also mentioned. The need for connectivity and the pandemic has further accelerated that, and it is definitely a reality. What we're seeing though is, I think it's useful just to take a quick step back to see where are we in digital transformation. What does this specifically mean from an industry and a technology point of view? And we were all very familiar with the third platform, Industry 4.0, where mobility, big data, analytics, cloud, and social, those platforms were initially rolled out, sometimes across the board, and very well connected in the larger organizations and very technology reliant organizations, but in other organizations on a piecemeal basis. And as they start integrating, and especially the cloud journey has driven a lot of information and a lot of use cases around the likes of especially next generation security, the internet of things. Now we're seeing a lot more discussion around the cognitive and AI aspects. Augmented and virtual reality is still there. It's picking up, but it's, I think right now from an African perspective, security, Internet of Things, and AI are the key innovation accelerators or enablers into industry. And we're seeing this transforming across all industries, from government right through to various banking, commercial, even into agriculture. We're seeing significant impact from it being digitally enabled. I'm just going to run through a couple here just to give a context. From a government point of view, we're seeing a lot more surveillance on the one hand, security-related issues, but also citizen-friendly digital services, provision of remote healthcare, provision of remote education, remote record keeping, remote regulation, and managing people's records and so on. Education is obviously a big one now, especially during this virtual pandemic time. You're seeing companies like Vodacom, some of the big MTNs and so on, the big telcos, providing specific services at no charge or at a very low charge, so that children and students can still be educated in real time. Retail, massive impact there. And what we've seen is, in South African context, a very, very quick swing, very quick pivot from the major retailers, from having online e-commerce as an also-ran to a very important and critical part, in fact, of their retail experience, enabling home delivery, enabling new distribution channels and so on. But also at the same time, making it very much an omni-channel experience, where customer experience and measuring that customer experience in a real-time and operational basis becomes very, very key. Transport, from a logistics point of view, has seen significant impact as well. People order online, they want to know where their order is, and they want to know how fast they're going to get it. And there's a security element, there's a cost-saving element that we see there as well. Healthcare, we've seen a lot of the healthcare areas picking up quickly. National Healthcare Laboratory Services here in South Africa, and I believe across the continent as well, are taking significant steps to make sure that there's real-time monitoring, if you like, using cloud-based systems to be able to accumulate and disseminate important information and important data on a very quick basis. Example of that is just reporting on the COVID statistics on a day-to-day basis. There's a significant amount of infrastructure and technology behind that, all digital and all cloud-based. And then obviously in the manufacturing sector would be another area. We're seeing the impact being significant, from dark factories or black factories, where most measurement and control is automated. We're also seeing that in the mining sector, where it's reducing a lot of the human factor, if I can put it that way, across the industry, to make it more efficient, more effective, and be able to control in a real-time and cost-effective manner. And in sub-Saharan Africa, and here with IDC does a lot of research across sub-Saharan Africa, which would include then East and West Africa, that we've interviewed a lot of the CIOs across the region. and to see where are we in terms of the level of maturity that most end user organizations, corporate level organizations, are at across this region. And encouragingly, we're seeing about 56% of the CIOs at large organizations, here we're talking organizations employing more than 100 people, are currently engaged in some form of digital information or digital transformation initiative. 25% are starting this year. They just kicked off their programs. So, and there's about 20% odd that are not engaged but planning, or they have no plans. The no plans ones are the guys are the laggards. They're going to be, I think this COVID thing is going to change that picture significantly as well. And the key priorities that we're seeing motivating why to go on this digital transformation journey or to extend on that journey are very much around customer excellence and operational excellence. Customer excellence being able to reach the customer, service the customer, and obtain feedback from the customer in a real-time basis, and adjust stock holdings, adjust reaching patterns and so on a real-time basis, and operationally making sure that you're managing your processes and systems in such a way that you can manage costs and be most efficient and most agile across the board. Now, obviously, that's going to mean improved levels of competition. Companies that digitally transform, Deirdre did mention this, they transform, they become more speedy, they become more agile, and with that, they become more competitive. And customer satisfaction goes up, they increase their business footprint and compete effectively. From a South African perspective, what are the key areas there that the focus is on? Very much on accelerating the DX efforts, continuing them, and also initiating brand new efforts. This was a survey we did in May, and we see that the stall or slow down DX efforts and focusing on keeping the lights on has gone down significantly. We did a similar survey and asked similar questions at the beginning of the year, just in early January, in fact, mid-January. And what we saw then was a long focus on, because the economy, especially in South Africa, was very, and remains very, very depressed. We saw a lot of focus on slowing down efforts, keeping the lights on and so on. And that is completely pivoted. It's gone 180 degrees. A lot more focus on DX. Where are they going? How to implement it effectively, reallocation of budgets, and expanding the digital transformation plans and strategies within organizations across South Africa. There's a few examples just to see, where these specifics are. And I'm going to pick out 3 industries that we're seeing significant digital transformation acceleration. Very much in the banking sector, especially on the customer side. You'll notice, if you are in South Africa, a lot of the bank's branches are minimal staff, or they've shut the branches down for the period of the lockdown. That means all the payments, all the normal retail banking transactions, customer-facing stuff, has to happen online. And a lot of investment into that digital-only approach and transforming branches into making sure your branch is in your house. About 76% of the banks we spoke to are scaling up their online businesses significantly, offering additional services, offering a different product sets, and increasing their customer touch, interestingly, through the use of AI and chatbots and so on, to just make the process a lot more relationship focused and a lot more friendly. Corporate banking, a lot more as a service models are growing there. Total corporate banking spend is about 4% now. That's going up quite quickly. And the benefit here is the real-time analytics. Again, AI, a big part of this, gathering lots and lots of information to make better decisions within the bank in terms of capital allocation, loans, loan worthiness of companies and organizations, testing out of business models and so on, and coming up with new ideas to come in with, especially in the online space, in the corporate banking space, where digital transformation using mobile, using big data analytics and AI especially, all based on a cloud platform, becomes very, very key. Obviously, social media is a big piece of that. In the back end of the banks as well, we're seeing a lot of acceleration there, especially in the security and the digital trust area. Anti-money laundering, cybersecurity, threat detection, and compliance. Those areas are a big priority. As much as companies and banks especially have moved to an online presence, and motivating the customer of one, if you like. That's a reality. The problem is that each of these new access points, be they mobile, be they a desktop at home, be they a laptop at a coffee shop, represent a new threat entry level or threat platform. And banks are doing a lot to make sure that the trust in the bank itself and the systems that they provide is not eroded. A lot of banks in the area are looking at cloud first and cloud also for new capabilities. Products and services launched via the cloud using the bank's AI. Simple example there is just looking at small businesses, their financial reporting requirements. Usually that's a big drag on a small business, especially the really small businesses, where they've got to do a lot of administration, which means less time in the field facing clients, as it were, or in the factory producing the goods. So a lot of those services now been offered by the banks to ensure that they're compliant from a taxation and regulation point of view. And also then collaborating with fintech, and we're seeing a lot of growth in the fintech area. And interestingly, collaboration between startup fintechs and company and traditional banks and the big telcos. We're seeing a lot of interesting collaboration happening there as part of their digital transformation initiatives. Looking at the transportation logistics area, big crisis. The airlines are really facing huge problems. They're trying to create new digital business models. Public transport area, the passenger economy there is you're seeing in other areas, not so much in South Africa at this stage, but certainly, and we would expect this to eventually come through to us, is the use in the public transport sector, managing maybe the taxis or the matatus in a better way, routing, loading, and so on, and managing traffic and traffic congestion and so on. And also then you've seen the likes of Uber and so on, definitely transforming their business models using where passengers that were affected by the pandemic, moving into online delivery models and so on. In the cargo and logistics area, a lot of the blockchain type technologies are coming to the fore, so that you can track track a good from where it was produced, what its provenance was in the foodstuff space, for instance, right through to when it lands in your house and on your table. You gotta say where that came from, and you could have tracked the journey from where it is. Also, interagency collaboration between crossing country boundaries and so on. A lot of interaction there, where regulation and your customs requirements are integrated into the system to make for a smoother flow. This is going to be especially important in Africa, where a lot of inter-African trade is very, very strongly hindered by mismatched systems, especially when it comes to customs and border control. A lot of that is being upgraded, mostly led by the taxation authorities, and also some private public partnerships in that space to make that more efficient. Look at the retail and wholesale space. I did mention earlier about e-commerce acceleration. 77% are creating new digital business models and digital revenue streams of the companies that we've spoken to. Massive pivot in that area. Relationships where relationships were previously kind of offhand between the logistics supplier and the retailer themselves. Companies like Pick and Pay, tying up with online delivery platforms that were traditionally in the liquor business. I'm starting to build that out far more effectively. Groups like ShopRite Checkers coming up with some very innovative ideas around deliveries in 60 minutes. You go into a local store now and you'll see a very slickly run platform where from the picking on the floor by specific people using digital technology to see what the orders are, tick them off as they get picked, and get them to the client within 60 minutes. Very, very strong cloud foundation to all of those platforms. Rationalization, obviously the RPA and AI stuff, looking there, a lot of use of chatbots in the RPA environment, process automation, call centers. Call centers have obviously been hit hard by the pandemic in terms of staffing, how they deploy their staff and how they utilize their staff. And we're seeing a lot of chatbot AI technologies starting to be deployed to ensure that the customer experience and the customer relationship is not negatively effective. Then obviously supply chain automation, not only from the supplier point of view, but all of the parties involved along the value chain, making sure that those parties are interconnected, so just-in-time type of deliveries in a real-time basis. I'm also thinking of, how, with the impact on global supply chains, what are alternatives? Where are those alternatives? How can you leverage those alternatives? A example, not a good example, I do admit, is how the cigarette trade changed in South Africa in the last, during lockdown period. Cigarette trade was banned. Did that mean the end smoker could not get cigarettes? Not at all. Alternative channels were found. Not saying that that was done via cloud, but a useful example how business will always find a way to move products from the producer to the consumer. And if a business can do that using a cloud-based platform, so much the better and so much more efficient. So those three examples just to show the immediate impact and the reality behind this whole area right now. There's significant changes happening across the industry and even in the government space as well. I think the key now as this audience, a lot of you guys are sitting as CIOs and IT leadership. What is your success going to be defined on as you go as the future unravels or unfolds rather? And I think from the key point here is the CIO. 66% of the audience that we spoke to across the sub-Saharan region, and this is all CIOs, are saying that they are still the lead in terms of how technology gets deployed. 54% of the respondents said the business owner or the CEO is very much involved, and obviously 19% said that the finance, the CFO leads. Obviously, this is all very well, but ideally this should be all three. The technology, the strategy, and the finance should be combined and intersected and led by the CIO ideally to make this happen. What was interesting in our research, we saw that the chief operating officer was only leading about 11% and sometimes excluded from the conversation. And the 7% part was the chief digital officer, DX head, was a lot of them are the few companies that are doing it, and those guys are still getting involved. But essentially, they are aiming to take the role of combining the strategy, technology, and finance aspects. I just want to dig in quickly and see how this all changes. What does a CFO want out of digital transformation? What are his key priorities? Obviously, he's looking from a purely financial lens. He's looking at how to improve his cash flow, how to improve productivity, and support for the business partners, getting payments done quickly or receiving payments more effectively. Looking at improving decision-making and managing effectiveness, real-time data on which to base good financial decisions. These are the areas that a CFO is focusing on. Looking at the chief human resource officers and the COOs, chief operations officers, they say they want the employees to be more engaged. They're looking for more collaboration between employees and internally, break down the silos, and also be with external parties. It could be the customer or could be a supplier. And then a lot more organizations are focusing on the use of robotic process automation to take away, as Deirdre mentioned, and rightly so earlier, we're becoming smarter. So let people do smarter work and let the day-to-day work, the drudge work, be handled by a robotic process. So we're seeing a lot of interest in the robotic process area. And then also around all of this, a lot of focus on the old AI, artificial intelligence, feeding into that robotic process automation and the broader collaboration requirements. From a furthermore, what are chief operating officers prioritizing in terms of their key functions for digital transformation? And very much in the manufacturing and production, so very much still a systems focus, looking at your systems and processes, getting that, making sure that internally that these flow correctly, properly connected, and breaking down silos between those operations, and then through to the rest as distribution, procurement, retail, and call center operations. That's where they're seeing the flow of how they're going to roll out digital transformation. They said this was 2 years. We did this research much earlier. So this research was done in late January, early February, and this has changed. So it says 2 years there we're expecting this is going to be a one-year journey going forward. What are some of the benefits that are expected by the organizations from digital transformation? Obviously, productivity improvements are the key one. That's managing cost controls, making sure that the silos are broken down, making sure that the supply chains and the value chains are more closely integrated are the key areas there. Revenue streams, new and expanded revenue streams. So looking at the products that have been already supplied or services that have been already supplied, seeing how can those be digitized and digitalized going forward and turned into new revenue streams. And also seeing what information does the company have and how can that information be transformed into a service that can be sold on as possibly a digitally based service. Customer advocacy, a lot closer customer. I know in a previous presentation we spoke about the market of one, where a lot more intimate relation with customers, a lot more understanding and preemptive understanding of what their needs and requirements are, where they're going, where they are on their own journeys, and making sure that they remain loyal to the organization by capturing a lot of their data, a lot of their insights in terms of their buying patterns and so on. Of course, there is a danger here, there is a concern here around privacy, and the POPI regulations, POPIA and so on, have to be complied with. But I think that is an area where, and that's coupled a lot to the whole surveillance area, where we've got to be quite careful going forward that this is not, that this technology can enable the wrong type of customer relationship as well. Just keep that in mind as we go forward. Cost efficiencies, naturally, that's the CFO speaking up and the COO speaking up at the end in terms of process improvement. But very much, productivity overall, getting more using less, making sure that people are enabled from working from wherever they are, making sure processes are streamlined and well integrated, and may focus on the customer. Those are some of the key benefits that digital transformation is anticipated to bring. Of course, this doesn't come without a price. And what we're seeing is that there's not really fantastic integration or communication or collaboration between lines of business and the technology area. In the survey, we basically found that the IT department still pretty much develops its tech roadmap on its own without much inputs or alignments from the lines of business. There's about half the respondents stated this. And only 12% said, IT and line of business collaborate closely to jointly develop a digital transformation roadmap based on the line of business or the business function. I think these two statistics, that 46% and the 12%, are the ones we need to radically change and turn them around, in fact. I think there is space for using the ad hoc space to get there. And also, communicating on key priorities, that stands for itself. But the key for me on this slide is that, I think we as IT people tend to still believe that we still got to set the tone. But at the same time, we've got to be very, very mindful of what does technology bring to the party? What does digital transformation enable? What benefits can realistically be achieved? And how to work with a line of business to actually achieve these outcomes becomes a very key area. From a guidance point of view, then coming towards the end of the presentation is, the acceleration of DX is a reality. It's not going to slow down. And in fact, if you slow it down, you're in danger of getting left behind. Got to do a lot of alignment between line of business at C-level and filter that through the organization, get the buy-in for continued acceleration. But also look where you are, and that comes to the scaling of your digital platforms. What we've seen is a lot of companies have reprioritized budgets over the last 6 months to enable more remote working, more remote collaboration, and so on. And that's great. Also expanding their online presences and so on, and their online and supply chains and so on. That's all good and well. But the problem here is make sure that the investments that you made are not just going to be used for one thing. See if there's how you can build scale into those platforms, incorporate other existing products and services or processes onto these new platforms, and make sure you're getting the most value out of them. Agile infrastructure, I think that is a key. The digital platform enables massive agility, massive speed. make use of it, use it, you know, and get the maximum benefit there. And last but definitely not least is make sure that there's trust. And that is the whole security area. If the security area is not absolutely bulletproof, it only takes one breach to reduce the trust, and then you're going to have problems going forward to rebuild that trust. See, there's an announcement this morning again, one major insurance house has been hacked, big problems, and a lot of professional credibility and corporate risk that comes out of that. In closing, I'd just like to say, you know, keep it in mind as well. Make sure that whatever you do it's reliable and replicable. Make sure that there's, you know, the platforms are bulletproof from that point of view, technical point of view. Make sure they're accessible. Make sure they're affordable across your various customer bases, and also if you're doing an internal cost sharing arrangement, make sure that you keep it affordable, and then finally check on the security. With that, that concludes my presentation. Thank you very much. I appreciate any questions that you may have.
Thanks, Mark. I do agree. Kinago, the time is now to address changing business landscapes. Up next, I would like to welcome Yaku Mas, General Manager of Shift DX, who will be sharing with us a bit about the digital transformation journey they have been on with Syspro.
Thank you, Alyssa. Thanks for the opportunity. Just like to share my screen. The previous one was neat. There we go. So, yeah, thanks for the opportunity to share with you guys some of our experience over the past few years, specifically with regards to our journey with Syspro. My name is Yaku Mas, and I'm the General Manager of Shift DX, which is part of the BKB group. And I would like today basically share with you our journey, specifically with digital transformation, and how we've gone about changing our world. It's all about artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, advanced analytics, and blockchain, and how we've incorporated that into the new realities that we foresee for our business. I need to figure out my slides here. Okay, so how I would like to address this is basically very much in the format of a storyline that I would like to go through with you. And the storyline would go something like, once upon a time there was an agribusiness. That's all about BKB, a business, and give you a little bit of overview of who we are and what we've been doing. Then for us as a business, I sometimes like to visualize that there's a two-headed giant that's knocking at the door for us. And we've been, all the presentations today was talking about what the reality is for us as businesses, and the guys that's actually the reality that's there for us as a business. How we are facing up, that's a little bit of the journey that we've been on over the past years, and giving you some real explanations on how we've been doing that. And then, you know, standing at the break of a new dawn, I don't think it's so overwhelming or scary as much, but there's also a lot of new opportunities that is coming. And then, of course, there needs to be some sort of key takeaways from this, and that is what's in it for me. So let's talk a little bit about our journey. Okay, so once upon a time, there was this business called BKB. We are now a 100-year-old agricultural business, very much situated in South Africa. We've got a little bit of presence in Swaziland with sugar. You can see as the largest wool broker in South Africa, we do about 63% of the South African wool clip. We pride ourselves as the largest shearing business in the world. That, of course, sheep shearing is part of the whole business model. We do about 6 million sheep per year that passes through our hands. Then part of this very important story is the auctioneering side. We do about 5 auctions for every day somewhere in the country, there is an auction that is very much hosted by BKB and takes up, I think, summarizes a lot of who the business is, in the sense that it creates a platform where a willing buyer and seller comes together, and then a transaction is then concluded. In that value chain, there's 52 retail stores that support that agricultural farmers. But the reality of that, retail stores are deep rural and are supporting the agricultural infrastructure on that. We also have 2 yellow maize grit mills in the country supplying, and that's where the business starts transforming more into the food supply side, into a sugar factory in Swaziland, and then the second largest exporter of raisins from the country. So, yeah, maybe just before I get to the two-headed monster, the Shift DX is a business unit that we established very much assisting BKB, but not just BKB, the agricultural industry as a whole, in the transformational challenges that we have. We feel that this is not necessarily a task that is very much bestowed on one specific business, but actually the learnings that you can have through that can be shared on a larger scale. So let's talk about this two-headed monster. And so just give a little bit of a step back from the current environment that we are in and taking away from that. We need to look at what's the various market trends that has an influence on us as a business, and what's the effect of Industry 4.0 on that. And that's the two sides for me, because when I look at it, it is one side, the market is definitely pulling us in a certain direction, but on the other side, there's also the reality of Industry 4.0 and what it actually is. So the one side on the market trends, and as an agricultural organization, the reality for us is that the world population is going to increase by another 20 to 25% over the next 30 years. Now, the reality of that, it does put a lot of strain on current agricultural abilities to supply in that food demand of the people that is actually coming to the market. Now, on the one side, we've got a growing population, but on the other side, you can also see that there is about 33% of all the food that is generated in the world goes to waste. The reason for that is that in developed countries, it's very much an oversupply on food. And in underdeveloped countries, it is just the infrastructure that is lacking, that does not, the food doesn't get to the people. Agriculture also has this burden on it that it has been to blame for the fact that you can see that 20% of all global greenhouse emissions is contributed to agri. And there's a lot of pressure on agri to say that you are utilizing I would almost want to say, the most valuable resource on this continent or on this planet is water to produce food. So, you know, on the one side, we also got agricultural that is looking bad at people are looking at the herding of animals and that type of challenges that we have as an industry. Here at the bottom, you can see that only 1% of the world population actually can be classified as commercial farmers. Although there is a high adaptability on technology, the challenges that we have is that we don't have enough of these commercial farmers that can actually produce in that. I've been around the world over the past few years a little bit, and it's been interesting when we talk about digital transformation. The fact that the South African farmer is not so much subsidized from the governmental side, if you look at other countries, that digital transformation you will find in the agricultural space, specifically here in South Africa, is quite high. And our farmers are quite working with these technologies. Now, looking at these market trends, there is also the consumer that wants more. There's a change in their requirements with regards to their preferences. They want more functional food, they want healthier food, they want food that's beneficial to us. And I think all of us can very much relate to that and say that we need to eat healthier and all very much focus on making sure that we are healthy. So on one side, we want food to be healthy. On the other side, you know, the food safety and transparency. We had the listeriosis problem a few years back, where we all remember that the polonies that was just withdrew from the cupboards or from the the supermarkets because they couldn't pinpoint which baloney was actually killing people. I've looked at the stats, and the thing is that close to 200 people actually lost their life during that specific epidemic. So the ability to pinpoint food problems and the safety of food is also from the market side. They are putting that reliance on us to say you need to have traceability on your food. I think raising there's certain uncertainties also in the market. We've got tariffs that is coming. We see the global trade tension between the US and China and the presidential election that's coming up. The reality is those things got all an impact on us as the agricultural industry. We've got transportation issues, interest rates that is dropping over the past day and what the effect of that is, but then also the laboring cost. What we've experienced as a business, our customers would like to be, related to a company that actually is looking at innovating and differentiating themselves. So it might be that sometimes we are not getting it fully right, but they got respect for that, and they like to be associated with a business that is actually taking up these challenges. And on the last side, mergers and acquisitions will always be part of the parcel. Companies need to see how they can be more productive and more effective, and so throwing resources together is going to be true in our industry. Now, looking at this specific slide, there are certain very important things that you can just visually see here. In the middle, you've got the connection of the world and how much more people are going to be connected. This is so true for me in saying, as technologists, if we can put it like that, we need to start looking at this and see that over the next less than 5 years for us, everybody in the world is going to be connected. We are going to see 80 billion people that is connected to a digital economy. And the reality that we need to ask ourselves as a business, how does that change our world and the effect that we are going to have on how you plan your business? Is that all of the people around the world going to have a cell phone in their hand to have the ability to connect to us? On the left hand of the slide, you are seeing the market trends. And that's just looking at the graph, you are seeing bandwidth cost, storage cost, and computing cost is all coming down. Once again, anybody that's sitting in technology today needs to look at these costs and saying, well, there is a significant drop in the technology costs that we are experiencing over this period. So collecting data for future use, maybe when you start utilizing artificial intelligence, all of these things, although they really now it may be expensive for you to do that now, it does not say that this is going to be the case in the future. So connecting our people, making sure that everybody is connecting, the cost of data, all of those things are dropping. So the reality is we need to start making sure that we change our business accordingly with that. Just with regards to Industry 4.0, and I would like to quickly just touch on this. Sometimes people find it difficult to understand what Industry 4.0 is, and this is why I'm saying on the one side you've got market trends, on the other side you've got Industry 4.0. Now, Industry 4.0 is the technology side of this. And as a business, these technologies are also coming to par. And the World Economic Forum classified these in the 4 categories that you see on the screen here. Extended digital technologies, the reforming of the physical world, altering of the human being, and then the integrating of the environment. And looking at them and looking at the various technologies that is under them, you need to ask yourself the question is, what of these technologies does possibly hold certain abilities for my business to be either digitally transformed or digitally, or most probably being disrupted by somebody else? In our specific case, and the examples that I would like to now share with you from this point forward is looking at what technologies has an influence on BKB as a company, and that's very much the new computing technologies, blockchain distributed ledger, the Internet of Things, and then to a certain extent, of course, artificial intelligence you will see, and some also with regards to biotechnologies that we are utilizing. And I will point that out as I go along. Excuse me. So, okay, how are we facing up to the monster, and what's our story over the past few years? This is very much our picture that we have of how our, let's call it, ecosystem looked like in 2013. very much focus on print media. We can really start looking at, let's call it customer-facing type of applications. So you've got your print media that says, okay, now I need to put a message out there to the customers that they need to buy my products. You then see all the various type of businesses that we have, the brokerage services, trade, grain, and all of that. And then that runs into the back-end system where we quite had a system of record type of environment that was quite dispersed, and the data was just lying all over the place. So the way that you operate with your customer, you move from a print media or from a storytelling, and then engagement, and then eventually the business that actually starts making a transaction that happens. Now, looking forward to 2020, this is very much how our picture now looks like. And with reference to Syspro, of course, Syspro sitting right in the middle of that, collecting all of that information as we are then engaging with our customers. But the reality is also on the left side that we started engaging with the customer app, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, all of these type of digital media engagements. And I think as a business, you need to start looking and say, what's the relevant message that I need to utilize on these various platforms that I then can send out and start engaging with my customer. So we started with the digital media type of environment, creating videos, creating stories about our business, sharing stuff on LinkedIn, sharing stuff on Instagram, and then that starting pushing relevant customers to our business. And we are constantly evolving from that. So that information that then starts generating runs into our ERP, because that's when a transaction happens. That's when something turns into value. That's when you can actually start seeing, well, a transaction happened. But even that transaction is also collecting information. Then we went forward and started creating a data warehouse and started utilizing business intelligence tools to start segmenting our customers into various groups. So it's not just about the information that we are collecting in our ERP, but also how do you classify that data or that specific information so it makes something real, because it's then when you can start applying CRM tools to make your guys, that's like your marketing people or your field guys, work more effectively with customers. So also on the digital trade, and this is an experience that we've been having over the past, we started in February with our first thing. We always knew that we will have to digitalize the auctioneering system. That is one of the things that has, I think, a big chance of being disrupted. We looked for 3 years for a very specific solution, and maybe by chance and happy enough, we found one that was from the US, and we implemented, and we had our first digital auction in February of this year. That came on the back of a foot and mouth disease that was reigning in the country, where the borders was locked and it wasn't allowed to move animals, so we needed to find an alternative. So we had our first digital auction in February. It was a major success. Actually, 60% of the animals that was sold to Taiwanese, which was interesting. And then, of course, the whole epidemic happened, COVID-19, and we were locked down. And we started on the 6th of April with our first, what we call Monday production auctions. And what we're doing is we are creating a marketplace where we are now putting this information that we are collecting around various lots of animals, and we are bringing these to this auction. Now, up till this presentation, we actually now had 17 auctions. Every Monday we are having them, and what we are seeing is various markets now signing up to a concentration, one marketplace. It takes him half an hour, and he can buy all these animals there with a data-infused lot, as I call it. We've sold more than 40,000 animals from in that 16 auction, raising more than 60 million rand in turnover over that period. Something that I did not expect, and I think what you need to take from this is that while you're in this digital transformation roadmap, you must also open your mind in what you are most probably going to find is going to be a direction that you did not foresee moving into, is the stud auctions. I budgeted not for a lot of stud auctions because that's not really the focus that we want to go to. And what we see on the stud auctions was that the stud auction is where it's the guys are bringing genetics to that specific party, and they are then selling animals that goes with regards to the genetic improvement of the herd of each farmer. We've had more than 2,500 registered buyers at these stud auctions. It was a solution that was the same solution that can actually be utilized. We have more than 70 stud auctions that is scheduled until the end of October, and we've created a relationship with a Namibian company, and even during lockdown, I think it was the 15th of May, we had a stud auction that was run from a small town in Namibia called Stampriet, where the guy sold more than 35% of his animals to South African buyers from this auction. Once again, it should have been a physical auction. The guy created opportunities, and the information that we are collecting from this, it just shows you that there is huge opportunities also in that space and how it's been transforming. But we are also learning from that experience and seeing that it's not necessarily what you, it's not the solution that needs to be for everybody. I think at the end of the epidemic, as we go into stage 2 and maybe later 1, the digital transformation will stay, but it will take in a different type of format because it's not necessarily a hammer that you need to utilize for each situation, but you need as a business look at the data. Then with regards to digital audit trail, this is where the blockchain technology came in. What we've built is a full provenance dashboard that is backed by blockchain technology. We've launched this on the 1st of July. It took us about 2 years to get to this point where we've got each wool bale now on this technology. And what we've seen is that the experience that I can share with regards to this, it was actually started off when we had the foot and mouth disease in the wool industry, and the wool market was once again closed down. Why? Because we couldn't pinpoint which specific wool bales had the problem on it. So looking back at the realization that we as an industry, or maybe as a business see, is that we will have to get the otherwise, we will constantly be confronted by government closing down that specific markets for us if we can't pinpoint this. So we are now collecting information with regards to the wool, when it's received at PKB, when it goes onto sale, the ordering process, the packing instructions, shipping instructions, all of that is then logged, and it gives a full audit trail. This is actually a discussion for another day, but it's such cool stuff now to start seeing this information as we are now collecting this information. Standing at the break of a new dawn is also the reality that we need to see to say this is not the end of the journey. And as the previous speaker has said, to say you can't stop this, you need to keep going on with this. It's very much a flywheel of how you look at your information, how you start collecting it. It's about the collecting of information, looking at how you collect it, applying matrix management. The matrix management, you can see how the data streams then starts connecting to each other and what's the touch points on maybe your clients and what services they use. And then you start doing the modeling. And what we've done is we started modeling with the information that we had on the business intelligence side. We start segmenting our customer base into platinum, gold, silver, and bronze clients and start applying specific tools to that. And then you start creating data-informed content that talks to those various segmentations that we did in. And then the execution layer in our case is the expanding of this whole digital retail and the ability to sell more to them is something that we are looking at. Just a practical example of what I just told you is that we are collecting information with regards to genetics on each animal. Those genetics previously was in a catalog that was printed and given to the customer. But the reality is there's a lot of information in that catalog that we now capture digitally, put that on a digital auction. We then collect all of the information with regards to who's bidding on which genetic pool, who's winning the bids, and who wanted that animals. That animals goes to a producer on his farm, and you start creating a full genetic profile of that farm, and saying this is the genetics that is actually coming from that farm, and that genetics that comes from is actually the animals then that gets sold and goes to the production auction, the feedlot, the abattoir, and eventually starts reaching the shelves of the retailers where we buy the meat. Now, as a consumer, you would like to know, when was my meat slaughtered? Where did it come from? Was the animal ethically handled? What antibiotics was used? And all of that type of information start giving you, for the producer, a lot of information on where your meat comes from, but it also gives that 33% of wasted food. It gives you a lot of opportunity to start addressing, to say, let's start wasting less food and get food where the real need is. But that information also runs back to the producer, where a genetic pool starts creating, and that allows him then to start improving the quality of his animals that he actually then puts into this value chain. Lastly, this is what I would like to give you some key takeaways from that. I think we have learned through this whole process is build, measure, learn. Build, measure, learn. It's very much something that comes from the book, the Lean Startup that we've learned. Say, don't look at the big thing. Don't think this is this big monster that you need to, that's just too hard and you don't start. Start small. And as Deidre, I think, also spoke about, look at those friction points and how you can start addressing those friction points in your business by applying that build, measure, and learn. And even if it's in small increments, just start building that and learning from that. Elon Musk said it very well in a TED talk of his. People improve. We're looking at the Industry 4.0, and you look at the technologies that's coming from, that technology comes from people. So build strong teams and look at the people that works for you, because they are really, really important to making sure that you start building that successful digital transformation. It is not about technology, guys. This is all about people. Personally, something that I like to use is success and failure is written in ice, and tomorrow the sun will shine. So yes, you're going to have some failures, and yes, you're going to have some successes. But don't let these things, maybe stagnate you if it's a success, or that it actually puts you down if it's a failure. Because it will come better, and it's a process of just moving forward. And lastly, a thought that I would like to leave to you. We've spoken about it a lot about today. Digital transformation is not an easy ride. It is really, really difficult. And if you take up that mantra, you need to make sure that you start building an inclusive type of system where you pull guys in and you join in these type of talks that we are having today. Because and I'm on a forum where we talk to international technologists as well as CEOs and CTOs. Everybody is struggling with the same thing. The reality is we don't know. There is no book about this. So we need to work together. We need to have these talks, share some ideas, and learn together through this whole process. And thank you. That's my portion of sharing our story with you.
According to Forbes, digitally mature companies are 23% more profitable than their less mature peers. I guess I can say BKB is doing well and moving way ahead of its peers. Thank you, Yaku, for sharing your experience with our audience. If you join us for our upcoming episodes, you will hear more from some of our customers on their digitally transformation experience. Moving along to our final speaker, we at Syspro believe that we need more than technology. We need people. People are the most important factor in the journey. Let us hear from Musa Kalengo on what it means to act like a human, think like a brand.
Good morning, and thank you very much for that introduction, Palisa. Certainly a fascinating story shared there by Yaku. I certainly enjoyed it, and I think it ties in very nicely with what I'll be speaking about today. It's my absolute pleasure to be joining you here on a very chilly morning in Johannesburg, and I'll be discussing, for me, what is really important for us to think about as we build these phenomenal businesses, as African value creators, as we kind of hone in on the 21st century of shifts in the consumer profile, of shifts in our ability to use technology, that we start to prioritize this ability to act like humans before we think like brands. And for me, it's actually a balancing act of understanding both of them very well in order for us to proceed and to be sustainable in the future. So I'd like to start with a little bit of a somber thought, but Sophocles was quoted as saying, "Let every man in mankind's frailty consider his last day, and let none presume on his good fortune until he find life at his death, a memory without pain." Now, obviously, being a Greek philosopher, there was a lot of time spent trying to think about the relationship between the impact we had on the world and also what happened in the afterlife. And Sophocles was one of those that spent a lot of time thinking about and writing and documenting his thoughts and views on exactly that. So this quote is a very impertinent and a poignant way to start thinking about how we can start to act like humans, but continue to think like brands. I'd like to reflect on a journey that I've been on. And in my previous life, I worked for Facebook. I was very fortunate to have led the Facebook Africa team as we set up offices here in Sub-Saharan Africa. A lot of my time was spent between East, West, and South Africa. And in one particular instance I'd like to reflect on was very important. And it actually marked a specific moment in my life where I started appreciating the value of human life. On Friday, the 20th of September, 2013, these three boys who were brothers got up and did everything that they did every single day. They brushed their teeth, they prepared themselves for school, and they were very, very excited about going into a Friday because obviously the weekend was coming up. Now, the middle young man, his name is Ashuri, and they were based in Nairobi, in Kenya. And what was different about this day is that their father happened to be there on the morning they were getting ready to go to school. And as they were very excited about getting ready to go to school, they packed their school bags, and they walked out the gate and they waved goodbye to their father as they ran towards a matatu that was passing by. What is very interesting about this particular moment is that it changed Ashuri's life forever. The following day, unfortunately, on the 21st of September, 2013, there was a bombing at the Westgate Mall. The bombing created chaos, panic, and anarchy. And unfortunately, Ashuri's father was one of the guards that was guarding one of the shops, and he took a shot to the chest and he passed away. A similar incident happened in Paris on the 13th of November 2015. At this particular point, I was 2 years working at Facebook, and bombings went off in the Stade de Paris. And these bombings were consecutive attacks that happened throughout Paris. What was interesting about these bombings is that they were planned and they were very strategic, and they wreaked havoc in a small but very historic and ancient city. Now, why would I start telling you about two dilemmas that effectively put human beings at compromise? Well, because it was interesting to observe the reactions of three very different companies. At the time, I was working at Facebook, and Facebook did something which they'd never done before. There was a technology we referred to as Safety Check that was developed by a young Asian intern that spoke about her interaction with different natural disasters around the world. So Safety Check as a technology was something that we had tested but never had deployed. For the first time during the Paris bombings, Facebook put Safety Check into place, and what that meant is that people could effectively, on their Facebook profile, notify their friends and loved ones that they were safe with three very simple words: "I'm okay." Uber, who I have a love-hate relationship with, did something similar. They sent a message out to all their drivers, and they asked them to be able to take anybody that looked like they were in distress to a place of safety or to a place where there were some officials that could help them. Airbnb had a very similar reaction. They sent a message out to all the hosts within this Paris area, and they asked them to be mindful of people that potentially needed a place to stay, and if it was possible for them to accommodate them, to do so and then contact the local authorities. Now, during a natural disaster or during even an attack like was happening in Paris, one often asks how it is that companies can respond in a way that is impactful. What is interesting about the responses of all three companies is, firstly, they didn't have to change anything about their core business. All they had to do was respond in a more human-centered way. The reason why that's important for us to understand is that sometimes there's a notion that doing business in this way is actually not speaks about extraordinary people survive under the most extraordinary circumstances, and they go on to be extraordinary because of it. Now, this quote for me is particularly pertinent to us in Africa. Our continent, fortunately and unfortunately, has been exposed to many very difficult circumstances. And through the fact that we've been able to survive, we've been able to become extraordinary human beings. And so as the businesses that we build respond to this environment, it's also very important that we understand that it's actually good for business. We know that the sands are shifting around how companies are thinking about their responsibility within the communities they serve, as well as the greater economy of the world. Now, as we understand that being human is good for business, we also know that in finance, there's a shift towards responsible finance, impact investing as an example. This means that the people that have got phenomenal balance sheets across the globe have realized that they have to invest in humanity before they can actually get returns in the long run. Why? Because if we don't do that, we don't have a market to serve in the future. So having this as a corner understanding, it's also important to reflect on the key shifts that are happening within the different markets across the globe. Some of these shifts are observations that I've seen over the last couple of years, but it's definitely driving a change in how we're able to act like humans and think like brands. The first and most obvious shift is the one from desktop to mobile. And this shift obviously started to come into play primarily because a continent like Africa was a mobile-first continent. A lot of brands got onto this very late because they were still trying to think about how to reach people on desktops, when in fact the entirety of a consumer base had already started experiencing the internet for the first time on a mobile device. If we look at some data that comes out of our prevalence and our behavior, our mobile phones are constant companions. They say about 4.5 hours per day are being spent on mobile devices. I certainly track the time I'm spending using screen time on my device, and it's embarrassing how much time I spend on my iPhone. I spend probably between 6 and 8 hours on my phone. My personal goal is to get that down to about 4 or 5 hours, but it's very difficult. Why? Because these devices have become a very key part of our lives, to the extent that even people refer to them as the remote control of your life. We also see some research coming out of SalesBrain that starts to correlate the relationship between mobile devices and human beings. The three things that are interesting to note about this research is that we see that the attention that you pay to a mobile device is a lot higher than to a screen that is further away from your face. So your motivation when the screen is right in front of you is that you develop a very high level of intensity of emotion, as well as your cognitive overload with the information that you're consuming. So continuing to be in front of these devices all day and every day starts to increase the intensity of emotion, decrease distraction, but also increase the attention that you're paying onto these mobile phones. This is very important as we think about building businesses in the 22nd and the 23rd centuries. We also need to be aware that the second shift is from big screens to small screens. Once again, seemingly obvious, but very important to think about the implication. Now, a shift from big screen to small screen means that a retailer who was on the e-commerce environment actually had a wonderful amount of real estate to play with a couple of years ago. Because you were on a desktop and effectively you could sell umbrellas, hats, or even sunglasses. You had all this real estate to play with. But as we shifted from big screens to small screens, the reality is that you've got far less real estate to be able to drive far more value. And as we think about the relationship between real estate and value, what becomes increasingly important is what happens behind the screen. And what is fantastic about the presentation that Yaku made is that they'd focused in on being able to understand and be able to fundamentally change their relationship with what happens behind the screen, so that when you show someone a red hairdryer, number one, you know that they have hair. And number two, you understand that they may like the color red. The real estate that you have to play with is that much more valuable, and therefore have to spend that much more time understanding the data that drives it. The third shift is from single devices to multi-devices. Now, once again, it's one of those things that seems very obvious, but really important for us to think about the implication. In the marketing circles that speak about targeting and being able to retarget people, we have to appreciate that the customer that you're looking at in the morning may wake up and go onto their mobile device. They may spend the entire day on a tablet, and they may conclude a transaction on a desktop device at night. Now, depending on how you're thinking about mapping their relationship and their journey, you may think about this as 3 different people. And it's important to be contextual that it's one person on a user journey. And this user journey approach allows us to be able to think about how we build connected and related stories that lead us to being able to drive commercial relationships. A lot of brands and businesses haven't fully appreciated that the nature of this relationship allows you to show up in a much more contextually relevant way. The 4th shift is from search to discovery. And this one is also fairly seemingly obvious until you start spending some time with the nuance. And when I was at Facebook, I used to get this question all the time. There was a budget allocated and it was just a digital budget. It was just a generic blob of money. And I used to ask the question, have you understood the difference between search and discovery? And the fundamental difference for us to be able to appreciate is that when you think about search and discovery, we have to appreciate the law that Zuckerberg created called Zuckerberg's law. Go figure. And this law effectively is the relationship between content over time. And what it says is Zuckerberg predicted that everybody that logs on to Facebook for the first time will create double the amount of content the following year and double the amount of that content the following year. And so it goes on and on and on and on. So what that means is that the content created curve, which is that orange line, will go up and up and up towards what they refer to in mathematical circles as the vertical asymptote, which is an invisible line, but it never really touches that line. So the amount of content out there will reach billions and billions and billions of pieces of content. The challenge is our human capability without augmentation to consume that content is always going to be limited. So as technology gets better and content gets created and it goes up to the right and our ability to consume doesn't follow, how is it that we'll be able to get the right information at the right time? And that's the importance of the difference between search and discovery. Platforms like Google set about on a journey to organize the world's information to be able to give you the content that you're looking for at your fingertips. That's search. You input some data and out comes the information. A business like Facebook went fundamentally differently. They said, we're going to learn a lot more about you to understand exactly what you need. So that when you log into Facebook, you may not know exactly what your timeline is going to look like, but based on our understanding of you as a consumer, we're going to serve you the most probable content for you to interact with, and that's going to change your life. And so this shift from search to discovery has also been replicated by a platform like LinkedIn, who've also gone with a similar strategy to be able to curate an interesting and a very unique newspaper every time you log into LinkedIn based on your behaviors and interactions. And so the last shift, which is from text to visual, is very important for us to tee up a conversation around what this means for multidimensional, multi-sided businesses. And the shift from text to visual ultimately appreciates that if you consider what mobile devices have been looking like over the last couple of years, between 2011 and 2018, there are 2 key things that we see have happened. The first thing is that you see that the physical real estate of the actual device has gotten bigger. So the iPhone in 2011 versus the iPhone in 2018 is sizably bigger when you think about the physical real estate. Now, if you reflect back on the research by SalesBrain, that makes sense. Why? Because I have the phone in front of me and I'm getting stimulated by the interaction. When there's a downside to that, but that's a conversation for another day. The second thing that you'll notice between 2011 and 2018 is that we'll see that there's a prevalence of higher and more interactive media in 2018 than there was in 2011. So in 2011, all you could do effectively was update your status. Musa's having a great discussion with the guys from Syspro, and he's talking about some interesting insights about acting like a human, think like a brand. Full stop. That's all you could say. Whereas now I can effectively pick up my phone and I could do a live stream on Instagram or on Facebook while I'm having the conversation with you and produce dynamic content as I go along. And so these behaviors are really important for us to think about as we ponder on these shifts and what it means for the platform economy, or what I refer to as a multi-sided business. And as we think about these multi-sided businesses, we also start to appreciate the value that we create by being able to think about these shifts in the context of these new and emerging and really exciting consumers. And so platform economy is really governed by understanding the principles of demand and supply. In any business, you've got those 2 very simple curves. Those of you that did economics and understand supply and demand, right? The demand curve is downward sloping, supply curve is upward sloping. And with the demand and supply curves, effectively what happens, you've got people that hold the assets, or they hold the thing that delivers the value, and then you've got the clients, or the people that are consumers of the assets. And this is a primary starting point, is really important to understand. Because what happens in a multi-sided demand-driven economy is that you decouple these 2 different curves. As you decouple these curves, something interesting starts to happen. is you start to think about the asset holders with their own supply and demand curve, and you think about the clients with their own supply and demand curve. And ultimately, those two slides also develop frictions, and they have to be served by something that solves for both of those instances. The frictions that typically can be created can be solved by having a platform. And the digital trading platform that was mentioned by Yaku is a classic example of how you make the asset holder and the client intersect at a place that they can all get the right kind of value. And so an example of frictions that you might try and solve for on the asset holder side is low outreach, not being able to get to the right customer base, high asset downtime when you've invested and you've put the money down, but you aren't exactly getting the utilization that you require. Gatekeepers that may be in the process that stop your clients from being able to fulfill and being able to get the service or the product. We also know that on the client side, you've got different frictions. Content exclusivity as an example, media obsolescence, we've got low quality of services, we've got trust issues. There's so many things that stack up that effectively create frictions on both the asset holder and the client side. And what businesses that are trying to figure out how to act like humans and think like brands do, solve for these things in a very unique and exciting way. And so when you think about how we solve for this, you also have to think about how we can actually figure out what companies have done this very well. I thought to round off, it's very interesting for us to play a little the game. And we could put many different businesses at the center of that platform, but I'll ask you a very simple question. If we think about these two curves, when you think about studios and you think about an audience, and over time you think about the fact that studios want to buy movie rights and audience want to have distributed bundles where they can consume via subscription. What company solved this problem? I'm sure you've guessed it. It was Netflix. Netflix were allowed to produce and solve for some originals that gave the audience what they wanted and gave studios access by being able to facilitate buying movie rights and securing content that could be delivered through an amazing user experience. They were able to then develop a subscription model for the audience. Now this fundamentally takes those two curves and pulls it apart and tries to solve for frictions on each side. So let's try the next one. Which company was trying to figure out how to decouple the driver experience and the passenger experience? You've got it. The driver experience, being able to reduce downtime, maximize the asset, and the passenger experience, taking long to get trips, not having guarantee of safety and price, were all solved by Uber. And Uber, as a technology that solved for the platform, were effectively reducing fleet downtime while being able to provide a better service to the customer. And so the last question I'd like to ask is, which company was trying to create a demand and a supply curve that solved for the host as well as a potential tourist? And in so doing, they effectively drove supply and demand to be able to get more hosts on the platform, and through the tourists, increase the supply through a site. Both of these interventions allowed us to reduce risk and also be able to get better experiences through travel. And who did this? I'm sure you got it, Airbnb. Now Airbnb, Uber, as well as Netflix are all examples of platform businesses. They're also examples of businesses that have spent a lot of time thinking about how they can solve for the consumers that they serve. And in so doing, they've been able to develop a model that not only creates new value, but fundamentally integrates technology into doing so. We've been speaking a lot about digital integrations, as well as the journey that you go on as an organization and a business. And a big part of starting with that journey is to be very clear about the problem that you're going to be solving. A lot of companies find themselves inundated with problems that they need to focus on, but I put it to you that part of this journey is to be able to be really good at identifying problems, prioritizing them, and having ruthless focus on being able to solve one thing at a time. And I think a lot of companies have got a lot of potential to think about what this platform business can potentially do for them if they apply some very basic principles to think about collaboration and content and technology. We're very excited in one of my businesses to spend a lot of time not only building platforms, but also coding new technologies. We recently kicked off a project with the University of Johannesburg where we'll effectively be coding Pepper, which is the humanoid robot, and Pepper will be able to run some very basic tests to be able to scan people's foreheads and establish their level of wellness before students come into the class, obviously to try and reduce instances of COVID-19 within the teaching environment. So our technology team has been tinkering around with Pepper over the last couple of weeks, and we found some really interesting applications. Why? Because a humanoid robot, number one, is human, trying to mimic our human behavior, but number two, you can code it to be able to do everything that you need it to do. So I asked them to tell me exactly what Pepper thinks of being able to apply the platform economy, and this is what she had to say.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how you act like a human and think like a brand.
Thank you, Pepper. And to all of you that are struggling with this journey of digitization and trying to find inspiration in these really tough times that are COVID-19, I'd love to end off with a very simple and a practical quote. It's from Charles Darwin, who speaks about it's not the strongest of species that survive, nor the most intelligent, but the ones that are most responsive to change. And what I found really inspiring and encouraging about the conversations today are really about everybody being able to embrace, understand, and respond to change. And so I wish you all the best, and I hope to see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Musa, and thanks so much for reminding us about the human factor in this digital world. I think it's such an important thing to keep visible and keep in our minds. Thanks very much for that insight.
You're welcome. Thank you.
So for everyone online, thank you so much for joining us. This is the last presentation of our session, but before we all run away and we carry on with our day, there's just two more housekeeping issues I'd really like to ask you to help us with. One is we are going to be bringing a survey on screen, and we'd really appreciate your feedback on today's session. Did it hold value? Did it give you insights? And was there anything we can improve on going forward? Another reminder that our next follow-up sessions, our next 3 episodes, are about now unpacking today's discussion. They're shorter episodes. They'll be 1.5 hours each. And these episodes are really going to be around now unpacking all the different elements, cloud, automation, and really just then those digital citizens as well. So please remember to register for those sessions and join us on those unpacks as well. And then the most important, I think, of all things is just also to really let everyone know who our Twitter king for today was. So for those of you that did participate and did hashtag our DX message, we really, really want to thank you. And I'm happy to say that our Twitter king for today's session and for this morning is